The top 10 most terrifying regulations in North Korea, with the number one spot being every female soldier's nightmare. When North Korea is mentioned, what comes to mind? Probably not much, and that's no surprise, as North Korea is one of the few countries in the world that remains almost entirely closed off to the outside world. Despite being founded on socialist principles, it still maintains a state of high military readiness. The Korean People's Army, led by the Kim dynasty, boasts an impressive 1.3 million active soldiers, 5.8 million reserve troops, and 200,000 paramilitary personnel, making it the largest military force in the world. While the scale is indeed massive, the reality is that the treatment and conditions of these soldiers are far from ideal. In this video, we'll take you behind the scenes to uncover the terrifying secrets of the North Korean military. Given North Korea's limited land area, after allocating land for various industries and the basic needs of residents, there's little left. Providing comfortable housing for over 1 million active duty soldiers is no easy feat, however. This doesn't mean that North Korean soldiers should live in dirty and cramped conditions. Reportedly, soldiers are stationed in small concrete barracks scattered across the country. In these tiny barracks, over 20 soldiers are crammed together, with each soldier having only a small drawer to store their uniforms and personal belongings. Apart from the limited space per person, their overall living conditions are also poor. Ventilation is particularly dire. After completing their training each day, soldiers return to barracks where the smell of sweat lingers persistently. Besides the unpleasant odor, the main issue is the proliferation of bacteria and viruses. Under such poor ventilation conditions, the severe acute respiratory syndrome (SARS) in the early 2000s and more recently the COVID-19 pandemic have dealt severe blows to the North Korean military. Many innocent soldiers have tragically lost their lives inside these poorly ventilated barracks before even getting a chance to defend the borders. Yes, you see that right. North Korean soldiers have long been lacking in soybeans, missing out on the nutritional benefits of legumes. Let's start with some background information. Soybeans are nutritionally rich, with twice the protein content of pork and 2.5 times that of eggs. Not only is soybean protein content high, but it's also of high quality. Due to the amino acid composition of soybeans being close to what the human body needs, they are easily digested and absorbed. In May 2021, a report detailing extreme malnutrition among soldiers landed on Kim Jong-un's desk. In response, his directive was simple: all military units must ensure that soldiers have at least one meal of legumes per day, such as soybeans or tofu. However, this order didn't change the reality of food scarcity. Instead, it shifted the burden onto commanding officers. Caught between policies and practicalities, commanders resorted to various tactics to avoid punishment. This included granting soldiers leave to go home. Upon returning, soldiers had to bring back enough legumes and other grains to meet the requirements. But for most soldiers, their families already faced tight food supplies. Meeting the demands of their superiors meant either depleting their own food stocks or leaving their families hungry. If you were in their shoes, what would you choose? If you were born in North Korea, you might spend your entire life subjected to a relentless stream of indoctrination. This isn't an exaggeration, it's a harsh reality. How else do you think the Kim dynasty managed to establish one of the largest militaries on earth without armed revolution? From the moment children begin to speak, they are exposed to a unified narrative. The ruling Workers' Party and the ideology of militarism infiltrate every aspect of life and thought as subjective consciousness develops. For instance, preschools are adorned with cartoon animals dressed as soldiers, propaganda comics depict armed combat and the destruction of enemies, and children wear military uniforms from a young age. Even in widely sung nursery rhymes, you'll find lyrics like, 3 million youth will become guns and bombs, will be weapons and bombs for our great leader and country, sacrificing ourselves. Are you starting to feel uneasy yet? If there's a semblance of freedom for ordinary North Korean citizens before the age of 17, it's all but gone once they reach that milestone. According to the law, all citizens must serve in the military upon reaching a certain age, without exception and without any other choice. This means that ordinary citizens have no control over their life direction and cannot choose their own future. What's particularly infuriating and unjust is that many elite and party members' children in North Korea are often exempted from military service, including their current leader, Kim Jong-un. Despite commanding the entire military, He himself has never served in any branch of the armed forces. Furthermore, due to economic decline, the requirements for military service length and the height of recruits have been lowered. This means citizens need to enter the military earlier, shouldering burdens ahead of time. North Korean soldiers not only endure the extremely harsh living conditions mentioned earlier, but also engage in repetitive and often meaningless second-rate training day after day. Due to the exorbitant costs of equipment like vehicles, fuel, and ammunition, the military cannot afford the expenses of comprehensive training. As a result, soldiers spend most of their daily training time repeating theoretical knowledge and memorization. It's said that in addition to packed daytime training, they also undergo nighttime exercises. Furthermore, they are required to cultivate crops and raise livestock, not only to generate income for the military but also to supplement their own livelihoods. On top of this, they are subjected to a bizarre and cruel training regimen, which involves performing in front of cameras. Yes, you heard that right, performing. During these times, in order to demonstrate their bravery and loyalty, soldiers perform acts like breaking bricks with their bare hands, detonating explosives, and shooting at targets representing capitalist enemies, all resembling a circus school. Maybe you think these soldiers can tough it out, push through a few years, and call it quits once they've finished their military service. But the reality is far from that. Even after completing their military duty, they're still at the beck and call of the organization, tasked with various jobs like assisting farmers in land cultivation and crop planting, or helping workers construct water conservancy projects, and so on. Take, for instance, the completion of the Taekon Hydroelectric Power Station and the Sipo Plateau project in 2016. These endeavors heavily relied on the assistance of soldiers mobilized from all over. And let's not kid ourselves, it's no walk in the park. During this period, men and women have to work shoulder to shoulder, with men primarily handling tasks like mining and land development for infrastructure projects, while women are mainly tasked with cooking and cleaning. The kicker? It's all unpaid labor. Sure, participating soldiers might receive some verbal commendations and awards, but let's be real. What real impact does that have on their lives? You wouldn't believe it, but in some corner of the world, not crying can actually be illegal. Yep, you heard it right. It's happening in North Korea. According to the law, whenever the country's leaders inspect military drills, soldiers in the audience must enthusiastically applaud and, get this, cry tears of excitement upon seeing their leaders. It's all to demonstrate respect and adoration for the leadership. And no, this isn't a joke. Just look at the fervent displays of emotion from soldiers during the funeral of Kim Jong-il. It's become a kind of fanatical ritual. But here's the kicker. Soldiers not only have to cry, they have to cry convincingly, with genuine emotion. Otherwise, if caught by the surveillance department, they'll face punishments just like those who didn't shed a tear. That includes being assigned even heavier labor tasks or even enduring unbearable torture. And if things get really serious, like if there's any suspicion of insulting the leadership, it could even mean facing the death penalty. After reading through the first 7 regulations, are you already itching to escape from this country? Feeling like true freedom can only be found outside these borders? Unfortunately, it's not that simple. In North Korea, both ordinary citizens and soldiers are strictly prohibited from leaving the country. For soldiers, even coming and going freely from the military is no easy feat, let alone leaving the country altogether. Typically, soldiers are granted very few holidays, maybe just around 10 days a year, and most of the time, they need approval from their superiors. Taking a vacation abroad here is out of the question, unless they're assigned to special tasks in relatively friendly countries like China. But even then, leaving requires strict authorization. Such tight restrictions aren't easy for everyone to bear, so it's not uncommon for soldiers to choose to defect. These defectors often flee to South Korea, seeking amnesty. But if caught en route, the consequences are dire. There's a chilling rumor circulating in North Korea about a high-ranking officer's son who was shot over 40 times during an attempted defection. Miraculously, he managed to escape to South Korea covered in parasites. So, I just mentioned that the officer's son had parasites all over him. Isn't that strange to you? Why would someone have parasites all over their body? Well, this brings us to the dismal state of healthcare in North Korean military. According to North Korea's public health law, all citizens are entitled to free comprehensive medical services without insurance or bills. Sounds great, right? But several defectors have come forward to reveal that the reality of healthcare in North Korea might be a far cry from what's advertised. Some citizens recall that hospitals rarely have actual medications, and even if they do, they'll charge patients fees that ordinary people can hardly afford. What they see the most every day is just loads of iodine. Hospitals rely on this cheap disinfectant to deal with the daily injuries of countless soldiers. It's not entirely useless, but it's definitely better than nothing. So many times, soldiers end up searching for herbs to self-treat themselves. The harsh living conditions and heavy training tasks mentioned above are unbearable for any ordinary soldier, and among these soldiers are women too. There are inherent physiological differences between men and women need some special care when their menstrual period arrives. However, North Korean female soldiers only receive some bandages, without essential sanitary products or any extra time off. At times when female soldiers can't complete their tasks due to these physiological issues, they still face criticism and punishment from officers. While North Korean law stipulates that soldiers have the right to appeal, the reality often sees officers using their power to suppress any complaints. Persecuted female soldiers have no choice but to swallow their suffering, no matter how tough it gets. Alright, that wraps up all the content for this episode. I'm curious, out of the 10 terrifying regulations mentioned, which one left the deepest impression on you? Feel free to drop a comment below and let us know. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, or share it with your friends. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.